microphone on. If the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The public exit is located at the rear of this room. Exit through reception unless otherwise instructed, and meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Check with officers for confirmation. Please can I remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, you must speak directly into your microphone, which helps when it's turned on, which I just worked out. Please switch your mobile phones off or to silent, and I will now move on to apologies for absences and substitutions. We've got a substitution for Councillor Tuck. I believe it's replaced by Councillor Grassi. Councillor Carr is replaced by Councillor Vox. Is there any other substitutions or apologies? No. And are there any declarations of interest from the committee? No. Are the committee agreed that the minutes of the meeting held on 4th of September 2025 are an accurate record? Agreed. So I now move that the minutes be signed as the correct record, and the only parts of the minutes can be discussed with their accuracy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is Biodiversity Strategy Annual Report, which we're focused on today. The Cabinet Member for Climate and Ecological Emergency, Councillor Tomlin, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just by way of background, really. So I think we all agree that nature is crucial to us. It provides us with our food, water, raw materials, medicines. It provides us with services like the pollination and disease and pest control. It enables the cycles of nutrients and soil formation, but it gives us a place for relaxation, recreation, contributing to our mental and physical well-being. So nature is at the heart of all our basic needs, and it's integral to our survival and well-being. But unfortunately, in our time, we have seen significant harm. Urgent action is needed to protect and enhance biodiversity, and this council, has an important part to play. So, as we know, in October 2021, we declared an ecological emergency. That set out the need to produce a biodiversity strategy to help achieve nature recovery in this borough. In March 2024, the biodiversity strategy was approved by Cabinet and is published on our website. It identifies various habitats, species and spatial priorities that reflect key natural interest across our borough. It is accompanied by an action plan, which currently sets out 48 different actions requiring the council to continue to develop or explore work and opportunities to help deliver and monitor nature recovery within the borough. And it forms a live document that will be updated annually as actions progress, get completed, or new ones need adding. So since our last annual committee report presented in December 2024, a lot has happened that has implications for nature, both positive and negative. So we have the BNG regulations in place, the MPPF proposals that are happening now, or the consultation, along with the unknowns plans for devolution. Our local government reorganisation will have an effect. Perhaps on a more local level, the council did pass the motion to declare rights for rivers, which is something we're just finally documenting and bringing forward for Cabinet ratification. And the council has just closed its second Regulation 18 consultation on the spatial policies for our draft local plan. And we have also seen the recent adoption of the Hampshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy, the LNRS, which sets local priorities for restoring nature with a local habitat map that identifies the areas of importance and the areas that could be of importance for biodiversity. It importantly also identifies measures to deliver those priorities. This is something Hampshire local authorities must now take account of. But of course, there is much work still to do. So this report forms the second annual committee report and sets out the progress made over the last year and our aims for the forthcoming year. And it comes with a proposed updated action plan, which you will find at Appendix 5, which hopefully you guys as a committee are invited to provide us with your comments. So I'll hand over now to Becky Aziz, who will now give a summary of the contents of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlin. So significant progress has been made by the Council for Biodiversity over the last year. This includes work carried out across multiple council teams and working in partnership with stakeholders and communities. The report lists this out, but I will summarise a few key examples now. So, local nature reserves. We have the imminent declaration of Little Penwood, which is a 13-hectare site north of Highclere. It will be our 11th local nature reserve in the borough. A management plan has already been developed, designed to support and enhance the site's important bog, ancient and wet woodland habitats. A community volunteer group has been set up to help deliver this. The declaration will give people more opportunity to enjoy and learn about nature. Talking about partnership work and community engagement within the River Loddon headwaters, ranger and biodiversity officers have been out with the South East Rivers Trust to explore opportunities for chalk stream restoration in places around Basingstoke, such as Crabtree and Blackdam, Saundersfield and Eastrop Park. We will continue to pursue options working in partnership through regeneration programmes, community engagement projects and biodiversity net gain. Regarding habitat management, in total 280 hectares of council land is managed by the ranger team for nature. This is 17 hectares more than last year, thanks to investments in ranger staff and machinery. Work this year has focused on seed harvesting and sowing for species-rich meadows and woodland enhancement, including wet woodland. Moving on to community conservation, the council's ranger team has worked with approximately 17 local conservation groups. So far, over 12,000 volunteer hours have been carried out this year, contributing to habitat management on council sites. This is worth about 6 full-time officers over the year. Various wildlife events were held over the last year as well, including things like Green Week and the BioBlitz at Millfield. Visitors attending those totalled over 830 people. At the BioBlitz, over 355 species were recorded. Touching on the Hampshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy that Councillor Tomlin referred to, this was published in December, just gone. The council, as a supporting authority, worked in partnership for over 2 years with other Hampshire councils and stakeholders to get the strategy developed and published. Council officers gave key input into the mapping and background modelling and 3 consultation responses. Biodiversity and planning teams have already been having regard to the LNRS in preparation for the local plan and also in considering planning applications, and it will be used to influence land management plans and project work. Moving on to the Biodiversity Improvement Zone, or BIZ, pilot project. This was completed this year, or in the past year, which saw a 56% increase in species diversity on road verges and open spaces within the Hatchwarren and Beggarwood area. This included many chalk grassland indicator species such as clustered bellflower, Viper's bugloss and pyramidal and bee orchids. The rare small blue butterfly increased its range across the area, thriving on the spread of its caterpillar food plant, kidney vetch. Talking about habitat banks for biodiversity net gain, the council signed off the first privately run habitat bank in the borough back in September. That's a 4.5 hectare site in Kingsclere that will be managed to deliver species-rich grassland, new scrub, hedgerow and tree planting. Another large habitat bank in the Ellisfield area is in the pipeline, with the legal agreement currently being developed. This is about 12 hectares in size. Talking about local wildlife sites, 6 new sinks, or sites of importance for nature conservation, were designated in the borough this year for supporting habitats like species-rich grassland and rush pasture, and notable species as well. This included Skylark Rise, which is a council-managed open public space near Whitchurch for herb-rich chalk flora, and St Lawrence's Churchyard in Etchinswell, which supports lowland meadow and supporting the county scarce common bystort plant. Just 2 more examples regarding net gain. 10 biodiversity game plans for developments have been approved by the Council in the past year, with many of them exceeding the statutory minimum requirement of 10% gain. And altogether, they result in an overall net gain of over 20%, the majority of which has been delivered in the borough. And as a last example, species monitoring. A new monitoring framework developed by the Council's biodiversity team has been implemented this year to detail how we will monitor many of the strategy's identified priority species, including moths and butterflies, reptiles and amphibians, bats and dormice. 20 volunteers from the local community were recruited to help with this work, and approximately 4,500 records were submitted by volunteers and officers, with 585 new species recorded on council sites. This included species such as the brown streak butterfly and small emerald moth, both of which are Section 41 priority species. So the key next steps for the year ahead in terms of the strategy includes developing and implementing council-led or partnership projects that will help to deliver the Hampshire Local Nature Recovery Strategy through habitat enhancement, particularly including chalk streams. We also want to establish further habitat banks in the borough for biodiversity net gain. We will be working on developing strong environmental policy for the draft local plan. We will be, as a biodiversity team, providing more biodiversity training to other council teams, particularly to cover local nature recovery strategy and net gain. And we also will seek to increase our reach and engagement with the community on delivering for nature. So the recommendation to committee within the report is to acknowledge the report and note the progress made to date. Additionally, as Councillor Tomlin referred to, there's an updated action plan at Appendix 5 that has a few changes to reflect the work in progress so far. So this includes the removal of some of the completed actions and the addition of 2 new ones. The intention is to publish this by the end of the financial year so that it remains relevant and up to date. Again, any feedback on this is welcomed from the committee. Finally, I would like to touch on the Council's biodiversity duty mentioned within the report. This duty is placed on all public authorities and falls under Section 40 of the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act, and we have a legal obligation to develop and publish a biodiversity report. This is separate to the strategy report before you. It has to document the recent policies and actions that the Council has taken to communicate how we are helping to improve the environment. Additionally, it includes information on biodiversity net gain. Government intends to use these reports from councils to inform future reviews of its own environmental improvement plan. The first report has to be published on our website by the 26th of March, and thereafter we have to produce a new one every 5 years. A draft copy of this has been recently circulated around the committee by email for your information, and again, I would be pleased to take any feedback on that report by email. So thank you for listening. That's it.
Thank you, Rebecca. Before we go to comments and questions from the committee, I'd like to invite Jill Smallman to make a 2-minute contribution. Yeah, if you go up there and press the mic button, if one of the councillors can make sure she knows what button to pressing. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. As a charity, Natural Basingstoke's core purpose is protection of the natural environment across our borough. We therefore welcome the Council's efforts to support local biodiversity through delivery of the biodiversity strategy. As well as representing the local community, we are part of a network of conservation-focused organisations and are progressing various strategic initiatives. Most effective results are achieved through collaboration, and we therefore stand ready to work with the Council through forums such as the Borough-wide Partnership for Nature. We ask this committee to endorse and promote strategic engagement with Natural Basingstoke in delivery of the Biodiversity Action Plan, beyond in relation to our historic role of supporting local volunteer groups. Turning to a more specific case, redevelopment of East Rock Park provides an excellent opportunity for biodiversity improvement within the town centre through restoration of the riparian landscape. This would be consistent with the recent Rights of the Rivers motion and meet community need for access to natural green spaces with the attendant physical and mental health benefits. How will the council ensure that this redevelopment reflects contemporary thinking with regard to the design of such community facilities by ensuring that recreational amenities are sympathetic to the natural environment and nature recovery is addressed through deculverting the river and minimisation of hard landscaping? I'm sorry, because I've given you 2 questions there, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Really appreciate that. Councillor Tomlin, would you like to respond to any of those questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Jill. So I think the main one there was Eastrop. It is at the moment being worked up with design consultants who have a brief that outlines what's the word? Our similar thinking to your similar thinking, shall we say? And that we are actually waiting for what they can achieve, what we can achieve, and that's our aim, along with recognising that clearly Eastrop is a well-used recreational space, and we have to manage it for both biodiversity gain. It is a very important river, and we need to do something about that, but we also need to maintain the fact that it is, with the growth of the town centre in terms of flats and such like, that it's one of the only open spaces that they have. So it's a balancing act, but you can see which side we sit on that one. Sorry, you have to, the second question, you have to remind me. I was.
So that was actually the second question. The first question was about engaging us in the biodiversity strategy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Elaborate, but basically.
Sorry.
Wasn't it? Sorry. Yeah, if you look through the biodiversity strategy, you'll find references to natural Basingstoke in various places, but they're all related to largely work we do with ranger services. And since we've become a charity, there are many other things we're doing. And you yourself, I think, are aware of a couple of them we're looking at. And I'm concerned there's a missed opportunity here for us to work together on other things, and we don't seem to have been involved in some things that perhaps we could contribute positively to. Things that, you know, I mentioned in the early days of the biodiversity strategy.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Tomlin, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Jill. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is something that I want to work on this year. We're pleased to obviously work with Natural Basingstoke, and you're absolutely right. There's more we can do, and I think that will be in our agenda. So have no fear. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Jill. I appreciate it. We'll now move on to questions and comments on the report from the committee. Does anybody want to kick us off? Don't know. Mike?
Thank you, Chair. Looking through the tables, I just scrolling back to where I wanted to ask my question. It was PL1, I believe.
The update or the original?
In the appendix.
Which
That's a good question. What appendix 1? Yeah, appendix 1, page 19. I've got the digital copy, so it might be a different page on yours. Anyway, was it PL 1? Yes, there you go. 10% PNG and local planning policy based on the results of the biodiversity audit. Sorry, I skipped the first part of that sentence. There wasn't sufficient evidence to justify requiring more than 10% biodiversity as a result of the audit. But then you said that we're getting close to 20% on some of these anyway. So I'm just wondering why we're not making it a more ambitious goal.
Thank you, Councillor Blackberry, for your question. In terms of setting a goal above the statutory minimum of 10%, there's quite a strict process for the local plan. There's a function in where we have to provide a very sound justification based on evidence. and viability assessment as well, to ensure that it's not going to an increased target isn't going to harm development inadvertently by going above that statutory minimum requirement. The MPPF is currently out to consultation at the moment, a new draft version, and they refine that further. I think to say that a 10%, going above 10%, can be explored on a site basis as opposed to district or borough-wide. So that needs to be explored, I think, through the consultation and the council's response to that. And planning teams and biodiversity team will be looking at that to explore that. But in terms of the biodiversity audit, at the time when it was published in early 2025, there's not specific strong enough evidence, it was considered, to be able to put forward a robust justification for going beyond the statutory requirement to require that of development.
Would you like to come back there?
But that was a very comprehensive answer, so thank you for that. I did a little bit of Googling just to see what other councils are doing, because I like to think that with quite a rural borough we could be leaders in the country on this. Cambridge City Council have a higher target. Kingston Borough Council have a higher target than the statutory minimum, and Tower Hamlets do, which, if you've been to Tower Hamlets, they don't have the wealth of green space that we do. So can you just elaborate a little bit on what the requirements are and how potentially we're not meeting them compared to some much more urban districts are able to do so?
I'll try and answer on that. I think it depends on the circumstances of the authority that has put forward a target. Some of these targets have potentially been put forward prior to mandatory net gain coming in. Obviously, now the statutory regime is in place, we have to abide by national policy particularly and guidance on that. There may be more of a case in more urban authorities actually to go for a higher target because of their deficiency in green space, and therefore they'd be looking for more from developers. Whereas we're a much more rural borough and have a wealth of natural habitats and species. I'm not saying they're not under pressure, they are. But we're not necessarily under that same pressure as other districts might be. We might not be able to put forward that justification in the same way. So that was the consideration at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Oborne. Sorry, I've messed up entirely. I don't know why I did that. I don't know any of your last names. Kevin.
Yes, thanks, Chair. If I can just ask a supplementary question about that. My understanding is that at the moment there's 17 councils that have got within their draft local plans a BNG figure of 20% or 30%. And I understand your explanations in terms of the considerations. The audit that was done in, was it June or July 24? By the Wildlife Trust, that said that the only comment it made about evidence to do with the number for BNG was that 20% could be considered. I'm still unsure about what considerations have occurred. If there's that many councils that are in their draft local plan looking for a bigger figure, and if the BNG returns that you've seen and measured have been of the order of 20%. It seems to me like to set ambitious goals, which is the phrase used, there really should be more solid consideration of setting 20 or 30%. The other point would be, and you could correct me here, but my understanding is if there's a setting of a BNG figure which is higher than statutory, that would need to be within planning policies. And that if that is not set in Reg 19 and the subsequent approval of draft local plan, it would not be able to be brought into play at a later date. So subsequent re-evaluations of what that target should be couldn't be made except on an individual site-by-site basis. So the question is, I guess it's you haven't persuaded me that 10% is the right figure. It doesn't seem ambitious, and it doesn't seem an appropriate one. That's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Chatburn. I'll certainly take your comments and from all the committee that comes back to me today. As I said, we are considering a response for the NPPF consultation, and the new take on going above and beyond the 10%, and the changes proposed for that will be a consideration of that. So we can keep you up to date with what we say on that. And just to obviously, let you know that we're pursuing lots of other ways to enhance and protect nature within the borough. For example, for net gain, trying to facilitate, the establishment of more private habitat banks, exploring us doing that ourselves as a council on our own land as well, and really pursuing those as measures as a way to deliver our biodiversity duty that way as well. So a lot of other work is also happening to help nature in the borough.
Councillor Gillow.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a question about OG4, the organisation actions. It's specifically on the local nature reserve. This section here, it confirms that basically you're going to have a borough-wide review, I'm assuming, of local nature reserve, like a priority list. Obviously, there's no sites listed. I know the progress is update to December 25, and I know obviously in full council we mentioned that Old Down Woodland Park would be reprioritised. So I was just a bit concerned that that wasn't in that update, because obviously we had that mentioned in the full council and in December. So I just want clarification that can we see a priority list and where Old Down is in that list, please?
I was going to say, I'm happy to pass to Paul or Councillor Tomlin, who might be better placed actually to answer that.
And I'll answer the question. No, we are in the process of looking at the old criteria and redrafting reviewing the list of sites, and we're hoping to get a paper to cabinet in March on that. So something that we're currently working on.
So was this basically done before full council, and that's why Old Down isn't mentioned in the ongoing review?
So the answer is yes, it was done before full council, but the decision we've made to put Old Down in the process is ratified that we're going to be doing that. So, I mean, it isn't saying actually any specific there other than the list. As you've just said, we're working on the list, but it is our aim to get Old Down up as soon as it can be done. The process is some months, isn't it?
18 months.
Yeah. So it's not a 5-minute thing, but it's something that we're prioritising. Thank you.
Got Councillor Slimmon next, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I thought there'd be more people ahead of me. Sorry, I was listening. I note in the reports that obviously with the audits and the way that the local nature recovery strategy has come forward, is that there are some sites that have suddenly found extra reason perhaps to be preserved for biodiversity reasons, some of whom are actually in Reg 18 local plan. So I'm actually really quite interested to know whether or not what trumps what. We have got sites in there which are mentioned in here, which includes Skates Lane, and nobody is going to be surprised that I'm not in favour of Skates Lane. One of the reasons is its biodiversity value, which has now been identified and increased, I think, and Pamber Forest, which is next door to it. So I'm quite interested to see what sort of process is now going to go through with the consultation on Reg 18, and whether or not the local nature recovery strategy is going to be something that will help determine whether or not some sites get taken out or not. I'm sure it won't be the only site that people have mentioned, but in this particular instance, it's obviously highlighted as being a very special significance, and Hampshire and Isle of Wight Trust have actually said the same thing. So I'm hoping that the consultation and the fact if we're going to adopt a strategy, it does need to be delivered and not put by a side because things have changed and more information's come forward. I'd like some assurances that you are going to look at that within the whole of the Reg 18 review.
Thank you, Councillor Simmon. It is very frustrating. The sites have come forward because, as you know, they were put forward by the landowners, and the desperation that we have given the housing numbers that we've been, all the cards that we've been dealt with. So it's all part of working in the council now with the planning policy team. We can only put forward, if you like, the reasons why the biodiversity must be upheld. There's the MPPF. We don't know April time whether that's going to come out, what that might bring. So we will be representing biodiversity on every site. That's, I can assure you that, and we will be inputting to the planning policy team. Where it goes from there, I don't know, is the honest truth, but we will be working as a council together to try and deliver the best outcome, and clearly we need to make sure that we enhance all our species and our land and not lose out. There are lots of examples where it hasn't worked in the past, and we must make sure that our policies capture them, going forward. So it's a difficult time, but if you like, we're all on the same side, as it were. So other than that, it goes out of my portfolio because it's the planning portfolio. So it's slightly difficult for me to answer in any more detail. But we're working together. I hope that's okay.
Thank you for that, Councillor Tomlin. I do understand the problems and the difficulties that we've got, but it doesn't stop us raising the fact that there are issues. And obviously we're talking about biodiversity here, and if it's important to this council and important to the ward and important to our residents, it's obviously something that we need to think about. Can I also ask a question about engagement? I know when we reviewed this last year, I did say that there were an awful lot of groups out there who aren't mentioned, some of which there's lot of land that's being owned by parishes, a lot of land that's obviously owned by private individuals where things are happening that we may not be aware of. And you may or may not know that I actually went to a meeting only yesterday, was it? Oh, Tuesday, I can't remember what day it was that, this week, to talk about a potential with our parish of doing some sort of walkabout to increase biodiversity that's obviously come forward. And there are opportunities there to do that with areas where other people are managing sites of special scientific interest, such as Tadley Common. So obviously Jill has actually mentioned that obviously Basingstoke Nature, I think there may be forum, or fori, if we're talking about more than one, that actually get together and actually talk about how we can actually deliver not just on borough sites, but obviously it's important that many other sites are available and potentially there for development and other opportunities. And I think we all are inclined to work a little bit in silos, aren't we? I understand what the borough are doing, and obviously the strategy is to deliver, but partnership is a big thing. And I think there are going to be other opportunities to work in partnership with other organisations and other groups to deliver some of the things, because it's impossible for the council to do that. I mean, I'm sure resources. There might be a question whether you've got enough resources to deliver a very comprehensive strategy with 48 different bits in there. And obviously we can't do it on our own, so we have to work with others. And I hope that they are going to expand the partnerships that we can possibly deliver.
Thank you. Well, in answer to that is absolutely. I think in the first instance, I guess it's a general thing. Perhaps it's a communique I ought to put around is that as ward members, let us know the groups that you know of in case we don't know of them. That's that's the first thing. And yes, you've actually said our sphere of influence is clearly borough-owned land, but that doesn't the fact that we can't, if you like, if they need advice or anything like that, we have the relevant teams. So I don't see there's a problem with leading and this kind of thing. It's something we'll have to take on board. I'll take that away. But meantime, please don't hesitate to let me know if you like of the community groups that we don't know of that possibly aren't necessarily under the wing of Natural Basingstoke and that sort of thing. So yeah, the more we know, the more we can embrace perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on the subject of kind of engagement, there's on PE9 in here in the plan, I think you talked about engagement with schools via the Nature Engagement Officer. I just wondered if you could talk about what the Nature Engagement Officer's role is throughout the year, and kind of this says that they've engaged with 4 schools in this year. I wondered why only 4 schools and what other work they're doing and what the balance there is.
Yeah, our Nature Engagement Officer is Annie Bird. She sits in with the Ranger Services team, and she does a lot of, she leads a lot of the engagement that we do with schools, other educational organisations, groups. Yeah, a lot of stuff is going on. She's got, she led the development of an external engagement plan as well. That biodiversity team, ranger team, other communications team were all part of that, and looking to further and develop that. As part of that, we're going to explore further reach out to groups like parish councils and things like that. That's something we want to explore further this year as well. But Annie does some great work and helping lead a lot of these public events as well that we work together on, but she really helps lead a lot of that work. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Grassi.
I'd like to talk about Lichpier actually. There's pocket green parks, there's corridors to larger open spaces, including the Millfield, ancient hedgerows. But the question I want to ask is, there is Daneshill Nature, a natural woodland, which is quite vast and is a sink actually, and there's bats and foxes and woodpeckers and lots of natural woodlands and so much nature that scurries around at night while we're all asleep. Why it's not included, and why is it so neglected? It has terraces, which is a way of stopping the water running so fast down. It's quite an ancient thing, and also there are ditches which need to be dug out, and the whole area is quite beautiful, but it is neglected, and it is something that I would love to promote and be included in your list of special places.
The only thing I was going to say there, Councillor Grassi, is that we need to look into it. Straight away, I don't know if it's our borough land. Do we?
I'm not 100% sure.
No. Okay. I think we'll take this away and get back to you if we may, if that's okay with you.
And there are boards up which has got Basingstoke and Dean, which tells you about all the birds and the creatures that live there. The boards are a little bit old now, but it is a Basingstoke and Dean. As far as I'm aware, the woodland is Hampshire County Council, but I don't know that for sure. But it has got the boards up with Basingstoke and Dean. I have got a group of volunteers that are desperate to help out and to look after this area. So yes, that would be wonderful for Village Pit and Old Basin.
Sorry, I know the site quite well, but I don't know how she owns it, but we'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. For Councillor Vox. Sorry, I must have mistook a hand up earlier.
Thank you. I'd like to start first of all by saying how pleased I am as a ward councillor in Edingar at the imminent declaration of a local nature reserve at Little Pen Wood. So I'd like to congratulate the officers and the portfolio holder for the work they've done in getting it this far. It's a beautiful piece of ancient woodland. It's in my language, it's over 30 acres, and I'd encourage councillors to walk it if they haven't done so previously. But it does need a management plan, and so this is great progress. And I'm delighted that your efforts have been rewarded with so much enthusiasm from local people who are volunteering. So well done all round. I've got a question really, and it's sort of relating to the River Emborn, because this is sort of tucked in the northern corner of the borough, and actually flows into the River Kennet. And looking at this report and also the local plan, the draft local plan, I feel that it gets a bit neglected. It's not a chalk stream, so I suppose it's not quite so interesting as other rivers. But picking up on what the portfolio holder said about the tensions with sites being put forward by developers in the local plan, I suppose. Does he share my concern about that major development is being proposed directly alongside the River Emborn, and the potential damage that could do to the creatures that call the River Emborn their home, whether it's the otters or the water voles. We've got nightjars there as well, and also the water quality. And so, can we work together in particular in relation to the development of 500 homes that is proposed slap bang next to the River Emborn, which I think is an absolute horror story. So that's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. We have got the draft policies on the rivers in the draft local plan, which we're obviously reviewing, and they do bring in the Emborn. So we are conscious it exists and it is still valued and it is a valuable asset, and therefore it's part of it. Yes, it happens to flow a little bit away from us, but it is in our, if you like, our catchment. So those policies are working on in terms of how we protect rivers from development, not how we avoid development, because we don't necessarily have that control in our sphere. So we're trying to build robust policies that will maintain the distances, the borders, the buffer zones, those type of things, and we're challenging those as well, because there are numbers in terms of meters, but we have to look closely at really where we are. So we're working on that quite strongly. So rest assured, yes, work together it is going to be. It's going to be the next year of interesting reviewing of these sites, as you can well imagine. So we'll certainly be in there with with our biodiversity hat on, shall we say? Thank you.
Just follow up, yes, because I understand the dilemma, but you know the planning team is saying that a lot of these impacts on the River Emble can be mitigated by on-site landscaping and open spaces, and that seems to me a hard stretch to think that it's going to make much of a mitigation to the overall effect of 500 homes right next to the river.
Indeed, certainly sympathise there, and we will do our best, is all I can say on that one. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Can I just ask a couple of technical questions for understanding? What's the input of the borough on OG3 in terms of designating sinks? The reason I ask that question is it seems to take a lot of time, like 2 to 3 years from submission of data. Have you got any influence? Do you input to that process of approval in any way, shape or form? Because I know of a number of examples that have taken 2 to 3 years, and I know of examples that are coming through that would have an important impact on planning applications and the draft local plan that seems to have stopped. I just wonder whether you have any influence on the progress of those.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Yeah, we have a surface level agreement with Hampshire's local environmental record centre, HBIC, so the Hampshire Biodiversity Information Centre, and we fund them to do this work on sinks and survey of sites on our behalf, as do other Hampshire councils as well. So it's a process they carry out on our behalf. So yes, we do have input, and we're frequently engaged in that process. And the process does take time, unfortunately, and in some cases it can be expedited. But in general, HBIC will be told what, we'll give them a list of sites. They'll carry out the survey, that survey season. The report writing continues over the winter, and we receive the reports. We'll know at that point about important habitats and things like that on the sites. The sink evaluation process happens after that. So through that report writing process, sites that look like they might be candidates for sink designation, or they're existing sinks and maybe the criteria or the boundary needs to be amended, they are put forward to a sink panel, which is independent. So it's represented by representatives from Hampshire County Council, Natural England, and the Wildlife Trust. And so it has to follow through that process. So generally the timeline you are looking at between 2 to 3 years to sink designation. But if we know about interest before that designation, so there's priority habitat, for example, and we know about that already, that will factor into assessments and be considered.
Thanks for that. I better talk to you about some individual ones, because they're both at waiting for panel, and have been waiting for panel for some time. So in terms of all the documentary evidence, I don't suppose you could take that into account anyway in the draft local plan or in planning applications, because it's actually the sink designation that's important. No?
So under policy in the adopted local plan, and through environmental policy for the draft local plan as well, it's our assessments of biodiversity implications, considers key habitats, so priority habitats, as well as your designated sites and protected and notable species as well. And they all receive that protection and consideration through local policy, as well as the relevant legislation as well that relates to those. and the mitigation hierarchy in terms of avoid, mitigate, and as a last resort compensate as well. So you don't have to wait for a SINC designation if you know the interest is there, and that will be factored in to an assessment of a site.
Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to harp on just about BNG, but it happens that this question is also related to it. EM1 in the same chart talks about a report that was commissioned and delivered in February 2025, which was a year ago. And I'm just wondering what follow-up there's been, because it mentions Saundersfield, which is quite close to my ward, and you've got Basingstoke Common as well as potential, well, sites that we can use for BNG delivery, or habitat banks you mentioned earlier. So I'm just wondering why, if the report's delivered in February 25, we haven't got a comprehensive plan already.
Thank you. Yes, we contracted Arcadian Ecology to look at some of our sites and do an audit of them in terms of looking at potential for doing more for nature on those sites. That includes potential for delivering net gain, which is an issue in itself that we still need to work through, and because of the nature of how you secure and deliver that net gain for over a 30-year period, and in terms of legally securing, that throws up some challenges and barriers in terms of the council being able to deliver net gain on its own sites. So this work did also consider other uses that the council obviously has on a lot of its sites in terms of recreational provision, multifunctional green space. So it looked at those. It's an internal document, so it's not published, but we are referring to it and using it when considering projects. For example, Saundersfield, that we're looking into at the moment to see what potential that site has, how feasible it is to be able to do a nature recovery project on that, and it will be used as well when we're looking at other sites to progress on a sort of site-by-site basis at the moment. But it's still quite early stages with looking, even though mandatory net gain came in 2024, due to those barriers and challenges, it's quite a long process to try and get that into place, but we're working on it.
Cool, thank you for that. As long as you're not trying to put a pitch and putt on Saundersfield, that's the main thing. You've brought me on nicely to my next point, actually, because nice as it would be to set a higher target for BNG, a big part of it is enforcement. And while I was reading up on this, I found a report from what they called Lost Nature from 2024 that found that about half of all promised BNG isn't actually delivered. And some interesting stats include 83% of hedgehog highways don't get delivered, 100% of bug boxes, and 75% of bat and bird boxes. So clearly there's a lot of work to be done on enforcement. This wasn't specific to our area of the world, so I don't know if we're any better than the national picture, but can you give me some reassurance that we're actually going out and checking on developers and making sure that they're delivering on their commitments, because it's clearly needed?
I hope I can provide some reassurance. Obviously, it will be a rocky road ahead. It's not going to be a perfect system, and I think everybody accepts that to some degree. But as a council, as biodiversity and planning teams, we've been working together to put in a regime to monitor on-site net gain and off-site net gain in terms of the habitat banks that we're helping secure. So obviously this relates to a 30-year period, and before that the implementation phase as well. We have set monitoring fees to be able to fund the resource for officers to go out and check, do spot checks and review monitoring reports, and to keep an eye on these sites. Essentially over the 30 years they're meant to be delivered. So when we find maybe net gain isn't being delivered to how it should be, it would follow a process that's set out in the legal agreements, and we'll work with the developer or the landowner to rectify those changes and follow those steps, down to litigation if that's required. In terms of species enhancement features and things like that, historically I'm not sure that was something we could routinely monitor. We do have extra resource in the biodiversity team now. And so we have put in a framework to go out and monitor new development sites to check, are they putting up their bat and bird boxes? Are they putting in their hedgehog highways? Have they put in this pond here that they said they would do? So we've set up a system to be able to do that, and we have 2 officers that will go out and check those, and we'll follow up with enforcement as needed. So I think we're in a better position than quite a few councils out there. So that's lucky, and hopefully that's something we can continue into the future.
My favourite habitats are human habitats. So I just wondered around this work with Sovereign and Vivid to support nature enhancement of the land they manage in the borough. It says no progress has been taken because other actions were prioritised. Just wondered if you could talk about that. Obviously, you've also made the priority green, timeframe medium. Obviously, Sovereign and Vivid are key partners of this council. We have normally very good working relationships with these partners. I wondered why that couldn't be made a priority and why that wasn't being made a priority when we've got those relationships and they're also quite important partners. And then my other question, which is on a more positive note, over the last year, I wondered if you could just expand on in the urban parts of our borough, in the more urbanised parts of the borough, what work has been going on. Obviously, biodiversity creates a better habitat in all areas, including in urban areas. So I just wondered what work over the year of this report has been going on, specifically in the urban parts in the centre of the town.
Okay, yeah, and there is a specific action under the strategy to work with Vivid and Sovereign, and yeah, unfortunately it has been the case where we've had to prioritise other workloads above that. It's a bit of a balancing act. There's 48 actions in that action plan, and although we're well resourced for a biodiversity team, for example, compared to other councils, we can't necessarily do everything all at once. So, but it is on the list to pursue and further that engagement this coming year. And in terms of work that we do within urban areas, it really crosses quite a range of actions, really. So, ranging from things like the BIS project in Hatchwarren and Beggarwood, where over the last few years, a sort of reduced cutting regime has been put in place. That's really helped biodiversity in that area and really helped sort of connect some key sites that we have, like Old Down and Beggarwood with Down Grange, further down there, just improving this network, this ecological corridor has been a really, really good example of that, and we're looking to further an expansion of that. So that will continue, even though the pilot's finished, that regime will continue. And we're exploring, as we speak, between teams in the council, how we expand BIS, where do we do that? And so that's currently a work in progress. Obviously through planning and net gain, that there are always considerations through the planning work, and then ranger work in terms of a lot of our sites are within Basingstoke, for example. The Chinham woodlands, a lot of woodland management sort of occurring on rotation, and then you've got a lot of community and engagement work going on with communities and local people as well. So I think quite a lot, I like to think is happening in the urban areas.
Lovely, thank you. I think that's really important because bringing nature back into those urban areas is going to help people live a healthier and a more enjoyable life just in those urban areas. And I think that's why for me it would be really important for the cabinet to consider and for the officers to consider prioritising that partnership with Vivid and Sovereign, especially as the other work that's going on cross council at the moment with those kind of preferred partners. I had Councillor Chatburn and then.
Another very quick one. On your report on PL11, which is about the hedgerow regulations, you specifically asked for any examples that would help challenge the legal issues around enforcing hedgerow regulations. That's on PL11, I hope. Yeah, continue to deliver statutory duties regarding hedgerow regulations, and in your update you've asked for examples to use that. I've got a live example now, which is an agricultural field in a conservation area that's had a 4 metre wide hedgerow removed and a gate put in. it's under enforcement investigation, but I believe it would make a very good example to test out the quite complex and difficult laws and regulations around hedgerows.
Yeah, we don't often get hedgerow removal notices come through. Quite often, well, it's not that often, but yeah, there are cases where you'll find hedgerow removal and enforcement action is needed. So again, with this recent resource that we've had in the biodiversity team, we have 2 dedicated officers that will investigate hedgerow cases when they come in, and are working with the legal team, for example, and developing the right templates for removal notices. And
thanks, Becky. The 3 examples that I had were referred to the council, and they were pushed back to refer them to the police as crimes, whereas this example is an enforcement issue, which I believe the council is best placed to take legal action on it rather than the police, because it's in a conservation area, it's broken conservation rules, it's broken hedgerow regulations. It would just seem to be a very good one to take up as an example, which is what you asked for.
I'd be very happy to take details on that case and take that back and get back to you on that.
Councillor Isaac?
Yeah, can I just support that? Because I've got exactly the same issue in my ward, and it's been reported, and silence is deafening from the officers, I'm afraid. There doesn't appear to be any action being taken at all. That's a hedgerow that's been where an opening's been created for development, which was not part of the permission, and I'm not sure that any really direct positive actions being taken by us.
Just on that then, would you know where it was reported to in the borough?
Yes, I did it myself.
So who did you report it to, or which department?
To the planning team, to the enforcement team, I think. So I can send you the correspondence.
Okay, sorry. If you wouldn't mind, it's just I could then explore as to potentially how, let's say, it hasn't been sorted to our satisfaction. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Box, sorry.
Okay. Yes. I would like to ask a follow-up question on enforcement of biodiversity net gain, specifically to Councillor Tomlin. As neighbouring ward councillors, you will appreciate how difficult it is to enforce things like planning policies on developers, like the problems that we have at Dixon Road. And I'm not talking about Forestry Commission, I'm talking about planning permissions and enforcement in places like that. And it's very, very hard. It's easy to sit in this room and say, oh, it's what's in the contract, and we can take legal action or whatever. But developers take an approach of risk against benefit and cost against benefit. And a lot of the times they run rings around us. And I would just like to ask, as we go into a new plan with our Reg 19, what your personal levels of confidence are that we will be able to enforce what we're putting into our policies for BNG. Thanks.
Yeah, enforcement, I'm led to believe, is a service that is optional. It's not a statutory duty, and that we're not unique at all, but there aren't that many boroughs that have enforcement officers. But that's in the planning terms. Now, obviously, we've heard that we're looking to have, if you like, enforcement, not officers per se, but checks done by a biodiversity team members. So that is something. It's an advancement that we haven't had, we have now. So it is very difficult. A lot of it, of course, with enforcement is you don't know it's done unless someone spots it. So I tend to personally feel, rightly or wrongly, the onus is on the ward councillors to know their patch, to smell a rat, if you like, and then report that in, because with respect to the general public, they may not have the time to do that. It'd be nice if they did, but a lot of people do, so I don't want to say that it isn't a done thing. So yes, I think personally I would take it on board that we keep an eye out, and we have to mention it, and because we don't police the area, we don't have patrols, and so it's always going to be difficult unless we get the information or the intelligence, if that's the best word, and then we will try to take that forward, be that planning condition, which it probably always would be, but it could well be that we then get involved if it's on a biodiversity side of it. It looks like we have the armaments, if you like, or the strength in the team now to be able to check that one out. Thank you.
Just following up very briefly, and in a way just making a point, you don't have to necessarily answer it, but checking that something is done or not done is not the same as forcing somebody to do something they have said they will do and they've decided they do not wish to do. And it's about, always with planning policy, my sense is there's a bit of carrot and stick in it. The carrot is often developers want sites to be attractive to sell the properties, to make it good. You know, Sheffield Park, where I live, is being used by Crowdays 20 years after it was built, because they've invested a lot into it and they use it to sell lots and lots of new development. But often at a particular point, they think, okay, we've sold our properties now. We don't need to do this bit or that bit or the other bit, and they move on. So my point I'm making is that checking that they're doing it is one thing, and having people to help with so-called enforcement and making it. But if a developer does not wish to do it, we don't have a lot of teeth to make them do it. You know, that bit of enforcement where it is actually, if you don't do this, this will happen as a consequence. We don't have the teeth of consequences, I believe. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
If I can just add a supplementary comment to that. You may or may not be aware, but in the planning process since October 25, when planning permission is given with conditions to it, the details that satisfy those conditions are now being published. They never used to be published, so it was often difficult to know whether enforcement was required or not. But since any new, I believe it's any new applications from October the 1st, will have whatever satisfied that condition has been provided by the developer will be published on the website, which is extremely useful in cross-checking after a development has occurred to ensure enforcement is made. It doesn't add to the teeth, it gives you some information to help. That's the point.
Councillor Isaac.
Right. So this team is the champion of biodiversity, but we do need to build houses, and the government has imposed upon us a huge increase in housing numbers. And in the report, you say that your aim is not to fetter development. So this is a question about biodiversity net gain. Looking at the report, it says that you've been consulted on about 1,000 planning applications, but of these, only 17% have required biodiversity net gain. And it would be interesting to know if you could sort of summarise what it is that singles out that 17% to require biodiversity net gain.
You might be referring to the biodiversity report that I mentioned earlier that's been circulated by email, unless it is in the strategy report as well. That details a lot of the information about, it might be actually in the appendix regarding net gain, so apologies. Yeah, appendix 4. The biodiversity report that I mentioned as well goes into a bit more detail with regard to biodiversity net gain. The percentage of applications that we've had in the past year that these numbers relate to, it is quite low, really, 17%. And I think that just reflects the nature of development within the borough as a whole that we tend to see coming through. So under the mandatory net gain framework, there's quite a few exemptions to net gain. For example, a de minimis threshold. So the small developments that are not impacting very much habitat might be exempted on that basis. Self-building custom housing, we see an awful lot of that come through. That's also exempt. There's a range of exempt developments essentially. So it's interesting actually to see that those numbers coming through, and actually the proportion of development that requires that mandatory net gain. But it's not to say with the rest of the development we don't take account of biodiversity implications. We consider every application that we're consulted on under local policy, under the relevant legislation, impacts on protected species, and seeking enhancements, that might be alternative to net gain as well.
So 17% is quite a small number, and as a rural council, I just wonder whether it's more likely that rural developments are the ones that would be subject to biodiversity net gain requirements.
There might be a slightly high proportion of rural development that are exempt. It's worth noting as well that government last year consulted on net gain. There were 2 relevant consultations. They haven't provided a response yet to those consultations, but that would involve changes to exemptions and raising thresholds for what development would be required to deliver. So we have to keep that in mind as well, and just be prepared to make changes as a result of those consultations that will likely take about 6 months to come through as secondary legislation. So again, the figures may well change when we come to report this again next year.
Going back to LNRS, the GIS mapping is an extremely important and useful tool for that. It's been talked about for many months, but it's not actually on the planning GIS map. Is there any hold up on that? Because I was talking to Cassiopeia about it back in June and July, and it would be very comforting to know that whenever a planning officer is looking at a planning application, they'll look on a map and see its relevance on the LNRS. And as a ward councillor, exactly the same thing, rather than me having to go from one place to HBIC to get the data from there. If it was already within the planning constraints map, that would be superb.
The LNRS mapping is publicly available on the Hampshire County Council website, so we'd rather have it on our system, and we will, and as you say, GIS team are working on it. I think they're developing a specific GIS portal for staff to use for the LNRS. There's about 17 layers on that, so it's not something they can just tag on to an existing GIS portal, but not wanting to get too technical about it, it is in hand. But just to say, we do have access to those layers. Biodiversity team, when consulted on planning consultations, will be the ones considering LNRS and any mapping and identify measures within application sites and checking is there alignment, for example, in on-site net gain proposals and that sort of thing. But for the wider public and other stakeholders, for now, the go-to would be the Hampshire website.
Have you got an estimated timescale then, without going into the technology?
I don't, sorry, hopefully imminently.
Councillor Grassi?
What support do you give for the hedgerows, which are ancient hedgerows, and actually date back to the time where there was a battle at Basing House, where Colonel Gage actually went back to the ancient hedgerow to regroup. So what protection do you actually give on something as special as that? And that actually sits in Lichpit, and it's one of very few that are actually in the south of England that actually have got historical meaning and importance. And I would love to have an actual board there to describe the battle and the importance of this hedge, which goes from Swing Swang and it goes all the way through to Binfield. And it's walked probably largely every day, and people do not realise the importance of this. But it is truly important in the, what we consider a very leafy, very green, and with lots of pocket green spaces in Lichpit. So I just wondered, that's my question.
So important hedgerows are protected kind of in two ways. One through planning in terms of their priority habitat status and in terms of notable species that they might support as well. But also under the hedgerow regulations, which takes into account the age and the context of a hedgerow, as well as its ecological value as well. So through planning, like I say, in terms of planning applications, they'll be considered through that system. And under the hedgerow regulations, for example, when a landowner wants to do some works or wants to take out a section of hedgerow, they would have to follow a process to be able to do that as well. So sorry, and I'm just going to say as well, just in terms of interpretation boards and something of educational value for people, just to highlight its cultural worth. I think that might be something we have to take back and look into in order to do that.
Thank you. And can also ask another question, please. There are many mature trees in Lichpit and Old Basin. There's one particular tree, which is an oak tree, probably about, I would say, 500 years old. Absolutely amazing specimen. What can we do to have more protection? I have asked for a TPO to be put on it, but because it's not under imminent danger, that's not been forthcoming. I would like to see that on the several trees that we have in that area. I can help and identify them for you. In fact, I did a whole map of them, of the whole area in Lichpit. I haven't done Old Basin yet, but in Lichpit I have.
Yeah, hopefully I can answer that. I think it would be a good idea if you could send any plans that you've got in, and then I can get the tree team to kind of respond to the request and see if there is anything that can be taken forward with them.
Thank you.
I'll come to you in just a moment, Kevin.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to add really quickly on that as well, just if it's ancient trees, ancient and veteran trees are under national policy considered irreplaceable habitat as well, so they receive really strong protection through the planning system as well. So I just thought I'd mention that.
When I find something that we do that's successful, particularly something where a few thousand residents actually engaged with us in a very short window of time, I would see, it would be my assumption that we would try and run towards that success as much as possible, particularly when it's hard to get residents to engage with various parts of what the Borough Council does as an operation. This is about the 3,300 free trees that were given to residents, a very successful project, really popular, closed to new requests after a couple of days. Just wondering why that isn't an ongoing project, why we're not looking to repeat that success and what learnings we've taken from it.
I think it was actually a county initiative that we took care of in our area. So it isn't something that we actually initiated. Now the question is, should we? So note that one down. But that was the reason for why it hasn't happened again, because it wasn't actually us.
Lovely. I think, just taking note of that and seeing what we can do to replicate the success, even if it's not exactly the same scheme, something similar, and working out why that was so successful is, I think, important for us to do. I think I had Councillor Chatburn. I was looking at him, not you. You two.
It's a question about land banking. Is it Envirobank that have got the place down in Whitchurch, the big land bank site? Kingsclear, yeah. Okay. No? Right. It doesn't matter. The question is, what's the role of the borough within land banks in terms of, are they part of the legal agreement in terms of ownership for 30 years? Are they responsible for auditing it and surveying it throughout that 30-year life? Or are they an accountant for it in terms of saying, yes, it's all signed off and it's agreed and you've got X units and we will monitor the allocation of those units to customers? That's a long-winded way around of just checking what the borough's responsibilities are. But in addition to that, the important bit is if a land bank is established, let's say with 100 units, they're allocated to 100 different parties. Is the control in any way, shape or form of the 100 units that have been created within Basingstoke and Dean, and is the corresponding destruction of nature within Basingstoke and Dean, are those two things in balance?
I can try and explain it in a nutshell. It's quite complicated and probably deserves a bit more time. So I'm happy to discuss this with you offline as well. But essentially, a habitat bank to help support biodiversity net gain is where a landowner will put aside some of their land and manage it for nature, and using the government's metric, will generate a certain number of biodiversity units. They have to legally secure that through one of two ways for 30 years. So either signing a Section 106 agreement with the council, or it will be through engaging in a conservation covenant with a responsible body, and that's a separate legal agreement. So we will look to support habitat banks where the landowner is seeking a Section 106. And if we're approached with a proposal, we'll engage with them and we'll go out on site and check the proposals and see if it's the scheme that we're happy we would want to sign to. They need that legal agreement in place before they can then register that site on the Natural England National Game Register, and it's through that Natural England will basically manage the allocation and selling of units. We have no control over who the landowner can sell their units to, because it ultimately goes to a national register, but it would look to support the local net gain unit market. And in many cases, it will support sustainable development within the borough. Also, we have the benefit of the nature recovery within our borough for those banks.
Councillor Isaac?
Yeah. So yeah, if I've understood the reports correctly, there are some habitats, scarce ones, important ones, that are under pressure, and there's been loss of those habitats. Could you, for the benefit of us all, spell out what which habitats are under most threat at the moment, and what we're doing to reverse that, or what we can do to reverse that?
So our most important habitats are priority habitats. Some of those will be irreplaceable habitats as well. So things like lowland mixed deciduous woodland, a lot of that is going to be ancient woodland as well, which is irreplaceable. So, through the planning system particularly, you have strong protection and strong incentive for retaining and enhancing these habitats. The local nature recovery strategy mapping as well is another tool to be able to evidence and promote the retaining and protection of those habitats, particularly through the net gain framework as well. It all kind of works together to incentivise developers to not lose these habitats on their site. You will have instances or applications that will affect some of these habitats, and then that would have to go through the avoidance mitigation or as a last resort compensation route. Compensation is very, very rare, but has occurred in some cases. I would say from what we see coming through, most development in the borough tends to result in the loss of lower value habitat, so arable lands, modified grasslands, but we do have cases where you get the more distinctive habitats, and through the planning process and net gain regime, impacts on that is meant to be compensated and actually result in a net gain if the system works as it should.
Yes, it's just one thing that I may have misinterpreted this, but it seemed that there's quite a loss of lowland heath. Is that right? And what would be an example of lowland heath?
So we don't have too much in the borough, but we're lucky to have a bit up in the north, where the geology is more clayey and acidic. Yeah, so we have Thames Basin Heath fairly nearby as well, not in the borough, but one of our council sites, Wigmore Heath, near Tadley, is a nice example, small example of heathland, and also lowland acid grassland as well. On one of our sites, it's quite a scarce habitat within the borough, but it is present, and it's a priority habitat, and should be retained and protected through land management and through planning.
I think Councillor Tomlin had something he wanted to add just before.
So I was just going to say some of the habitats that are clearly affected are all our rivers, and hence we're doing our rights for rivers, everything we can do. We don't own the rivers, that's one of the problems, but as we all know, the catastrophe that is sewage outflows, it's wreaking havoc. So we're working hard, doing as much lobbying, letter writing to the authorities to try and sort this out. So we've got to monitor it. We put in river fly monitoring systems so that local people can help us doing the quality of the rivers. We're being shortchanged, I think, by the lack of resource from the Environment Agency, who are doing, I suppose, the best they can with what they've got, to be fair, but it's not good enough, and our rivers are very much suffering. We're about to put another 17,000 houses all into the River Loddon, but a hell of a lot, and it's got to get better, but we are faced with quite a challenge in the future. So that's one of our big habitats that we're in trouble with. Thank you.
Has anyone else got specific comments or questions on the report? Otherwise, I think if we've got anything else on biodiversity, it can probably be picked up in Kevin's work programme thing that we're going to discuss in a bit anyway.
Can I just reinforce the point you made about the value and importance of visiting schools. And I would suggest that we might be a bit more ambitious than 4 schools in a year, given how many schools there are. So it's very important to get the younger generation educated and interested in this.
Councillor Tomlin?
Just for information, a couple of weeks back I attended a senior schools in the boroughs gathering at QMC for ecology and the climate change. So it was a little bit of both, and that was the 11 to 15-year-olds, and it was quite warming to see the interest that they have in their environment and the effect that man has on the planet, all of those sort of things. It also was worrying to see that they have what I've learnt is eco-anxiety, which is a shame. They were doing paintings, for instance, showing fire and hang brimstone and lovely green grass and things, and it's quite worrying. So I was able to explain what the borough, what we do, the community groups. Big problem we've got is, of course, they're underage, and so they can't go out and kind of help because they need to be chaperoned. So the answer was, get your parents out to go with you. I don't know if that's going to work, but they are the future. They want to do it. A lot of schools have eco groups, which might involve doing litter picking, and it might involve having a greenhouse and a plot of land. So it's a start, and I think that's we've got links now as well that we can, and I want to expand. So yes, don't worry. I think we'll get through. But they're out there wanting to be involved, I think. Thank you.
Councillor Grassi?
I've been quite involved with the citizen science, and while I'm working away fishing out all the river fly, so many people are so interested in this. Families, children. I think it's a great idea to roll this out to as many schools as we can. And I've been talking to a manager of a pub in Old Basing who is very interested in the river fly, the science, and all the things behind that, and wants to do something like that as well. It's a great place. I won't mention where it is, so I'm not advertising. But anyway, it's the River Loddon, and it's a marvellous, wonderful chalk stream, so precious. We should do everything, and we need to pass this to the young people who are probably more environmentally friendly than what we are, because they're going to inherit what we have, what we leave to them. We must do everything possible to protect this wonderful, the wonderful biodiversity and the rivers.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming, did you have something to add there? No? You look like you might have something to add there.
Was that me?
Yeah.
I was going to add that obviously schools are very important. We've just set up a Tadley Youth Council, and the young people there are very interested in environment. And we've been promoting the fact that we're going to have our own BioBlitz on Tadley Common, which is also low heathland. It's much bigger than Wigmore Heath, and it is run by the council, town council, of the trustees of the charity, and alongside it there's Silchester, which goes across. So it's very important habitat for us, and we're going to do with other organisations, going to run our own BioBlitz on the 6th of June, and there'll be hopefully as many people as came to the one that was held down in Old Basing, I believe. So this is something that other people can do and get people involved, and to learn about nature and what they can do, and just get them involved at a very young age, because I think if you get them involved at the beginning, they're going to carry through. And years ago, we did actually do lots of greening work in Tadley and got lots of young people involved, got lots of schools involved. And you did used to have a schools officer then who did an awful lot of work with many schools. So again, I think that's somewhere we could explore. I'm chair of governors at one of the schools in Tadley. I'm pretty sure that if we got approached, we could probably do some work with people. But again, it's, you know, everybody is busy, but I'm sure that most of us know people in schools that would be interested in developing some work with schools.
Lovely. I'm just going to summarise some of the key points I would like to see taken back as comments to Cabinet, and if I miss anything that you particularly said that you'd like to see go back, please do point it out, because we'll try and use this as a chance to get some of those points back. So we've talked obviously in depth about the school engagement and wanting to see more of that. Also around the importance of enforcing BNG commitments and hedgerow policies. I think that was two important areas where people said it was important that we were enforcing them and that it's important that it continues and grows. Whilst we also acknowledged the difficulty that enforcement poses. We had a congratulations on the new nature reserve in Evingar, which I think is important to note some success and celebrate. I think it was Evingar, if I got that right. And there we are. I didn't get the name. The public speaker, Jill, pointed out about East Rock Park redevelopment being a really important opportunity, and I think most of the committee would agree with that point, where we've got that opportunity to ensure biodiversity as part of it. And also about the importance of really building on the partnership with Natural England that we already have, and Natural Wednesday that we already have, so that we can better use that partnership for all the things that they do and deliver. There was some comment around kind of lacking in ambition around BNG. Obviously, we're kind of hamstrung on various legal policies, but I think this committee seems to be in agreement that we'd like to see the council go as far as it possibly can on BNG within the framework of the policy as it currently stands. There was a few things that it was agreed that you'd come back on, including a couple of requests from Councillor Grassi that I imagine she'll follow up with you, so I won't need to put here, but please do make sure you follow up with Councillor Grassi on those points. And that is everything I've got from me, and also the Vivid and SNG partnership work, which I think needs to be prioritised. Or Councillor Harper.
I just wanted to end on a positive note, if I may, if we've sort of drawing things to an end.
Oh, we've got some other stuff to do.
Oh, have you? Oh, right.
Oh, the report we have.
Oh, have you? Oh, right. Okay.
The end of the report.
So shall I leave it for now? Well, I just wanted to say that, how cheering and refreshing it was to hear that sunflower and fauna is actually flourishing instead of dying, and I think we should give a pat on the back to the rangers and people like Jill and your colleagues and the other teams that are working on this, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed with the scale of work we've got to do, but these little incremental changes really help and make us feel better that we are actually achieving something. So thank you, all of you, for the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever you like. It's okay. You can leave whenever. That's okay.
By the way, we've spoken to Housing Association.
Good. Okay, so just the formal part now. We need to acknowledge the report and note the progress that has been made to date. We agreed on that. And to consider and provide any comments or feedback, which I think we've just gone through in terms of comments, if we're all happy with those comments. That brings us to the end of the, I believe, work on the strategy report. Yeah, the report. So now we've got some review of the work programme to do. Are there any comments, first of all, straight away on the work programme that people have they'd like to raise? Punsley? So, yes, Councillor Isaac, so I was just getting the work programme.
Well, it's noticeable that I don't think we got any agenda item for March, and I think so. And the previous meeting was cancelled, I believe. Thinking about trying to be a contributor to topics, I wonder if the committee would agree with me that it would be perhaps useful to examine where the council is getting in relation to many down south, in particular the relationship with the LPA in terms of the proposed number of houses on Many Down South, and also where the officers are getting in relation to delivery, i.e. What the mechanism would be for delivery of housing on the land. So that's one suggestion. And another suggestion relates to Many Down North, and does touch on what we've discussed tonight in terms of biodiversity, and it is also to see what look at the performance in relation to the bringing forward of a country park, which is going to be a huge asset for the borough and its residents, and obviously that's something that where we might invite the Urban and Civic to come along and update us on that.
Lovely. And the work programme request forms, have they gone in for that, Councillor Isaac?
No, I wanted to test the waters first before I did that. But if there's a general level of support for that, I'm very happy to
Well, I
do that.
absolutely. I think some of the topics are important. I would be keen for us to make sure that we retain our remit as overview and scrutiny rather than just receiving updates, which obviously all councillors ought to be receiving anyway, not just this committee. So I'd be keen to see the detail of what particular areas you'd like to be scrutinising in those, rather than just getting an update from them, because obviously we don't meet to hear news. We meet to scrutinise.
Absolutely. Well, our role is to scrutinise decisions, contribute to the development of council policies, review existing policies, make recommendations, and monitor performance. So I think one way or another, I'm sure I can come up with a proposal that covers that.
I'm sure you can. Thank you. Was there any other comments just before we get to Councillor Chatburn's particular work programme items? No, do you want to take us away, Councillor Chatburn, on your various work programme items? Do you want to start with the biodiversity stuff and then we'll move on to the other things you submit?
I think should start with the task and finish group as a. I think the phrase used was a potential refresh of the biodiversity strategy and action plan. It goes back in some history. I'm quite happy you associated my name with it, but it actually comes from a committee meeting way back in December 24, where it was agreed that it was necessary to have a task and finish group doing exactly what I've just said for climate and ecology. The discussions around the terms of reference when that task and finish group formed said to include ecology was too much, and therefore that would be taken off the agenda and flow on and have a task and finish group straight after the ecology one to just look at ecology. So as far as my understanding is, that framework was set way back in December 24. I think I'd like to add to that in that I think it would be a good time now to undertake that. I'll use refresh rather than review, but they're just words anyway. But it's important to emphasise that I would see it as being something that an activity that would contribute and help to an already successful programme. What's been achieved over the last 12 months is quite fantastic, and with a lot of changes going on as well. In fact, I'm really quite surprised that you've got the resource. You've got enough resource. It's probably a different debate, but there's quite a few action items in there that have not gone ahead because of resource, but that's drifting into another question. Going back to the task and finish group, my interpretation of what that task and finish group would do would be to go back to the formulation of the biodiversity strategy and action plan way back in 23, which involved a lot of external parties. So my view, although I'm not the controller of it, this committee is the controller of it, would be that we had a task and finish group, probably meeting for 5 meetings or something like that, and had a number of external parties reviewing with us their views on the biodiversity strategy and action plan, and whether they should be modified in any way, added to in any way, particularly reflecting on the fact that we've had 2 changes in MPPF 24. MPPF. We've had 2 changes in that. We've had BNG legislation and coming into play. We've had LNRS coming in. All of these things have been heavy resource distractions and heavy implications. And I think it would be a good time to get the input from all sorts of different organisations, but in detail about that strategy. So that's my 2 pennyworth.
Councillor Slimmon?
What Councillor Chatburn is referring to is the task and finish group that we did to help with our climate change update strategy, when we did exactly what has been suggested, where we brought experts in from external organisations. Councillor Tomlin was involved, and we managed to get loads of people in so that we could review and change. And obviously we actually moved the target dates because of the information that we got. And I think it was quite, well, I certainly found it useful. The officers said it was useful. The report came here and you all said it was useful. And so we did actually move. I think Councillor Chatburn unfortunately didn't attend the meeting, where I moved that we actually set up a task and finish group to look at the other aspects that obviously weren't included in that aspect. So I fully support the fact that it gives an opportunity for councillors to get much more involved in what is happening. And there is an awful lot of change, and there's an awful lot in this document, which has set 48 things, you know, even on the list. And some of it is a bit repetitive because some of it is actually hits more than one target. So it might be useful to explore some of the ways that we can help officers deliver what they already are doing with a fantastic job. It's not here as a critical friend, it's here as a helpful friend, I hope, if we can approve that.
Yeah, Councillor Isaac.
Yes, just to make the point that I will come back quickly with the proposals, because it seems to me that there's every reason why we should be able to include those in the meeting in March. I really do not want to see that meeting cancelled.
Yeah, on that subject, the last meeting, I should just pick up. I cancelled it with absolutely no intention of cancelling it whatsoever. I was told that we had nothing that could be brought forward in that meeting. Was suggested and recommended to me that there was no way that we could bring any of the things that were on the work programme, which I think primarily were the CLNS 106 review, which I'm still battling to get onto the work programme with officers, unfortunately, to bring forward, because I do want to look at the other part of this committee's remit, which is infrastructure. But obviously it is a big area, but we're trying to get to the place where we can actually bring that forward. I'd like to see it brought forward as quickly as possible, because I think it's a really important area that needs proper scrutiny. Just on the task and finish group on ecology, do we have kind of agreement from the committee? How does the committee feel about doing that? Would you like to see that set up? Are we all agreed on that? Is anyone against the setup of that task and finish group? No. And then if I could just get anybody who would like to be an officer on that task and finish group, would like to put yourself forward for, if it's a show of hands or whatever, for who is going to be on the task and finish group. It's Councillor Harper, Councillor Slimmon and Councillor Chatburn. Oh, and Councillor...
Kate Tuck's probably
Oh, and Councillor Kate Tuck. Lovely. Yeah, thank you. I will take advice from the officers, Councillor Isaac, but I completely agree with you that we would like to get that March meeting filled, and I will do everything I can to see it filled.
Well, we don't meet that often, many times a year, so I just don't think it's right if we can't find a way of having a useful meeting in March.
Councillor Chapman, did you have your other work items that you put forward or discussed last night at all? That's okay. But is there any in particular that need discussion right now?
I'd support that comment about cancelling meetings. It's really pretty bad form. Out of the last 6 meetings, 3 meetings have been cancelled. Yeah, and that's not criticism of individuals or anything like that. It's a statement of fact, and I think that is really bad form to see that happening. Really bad form. So if there's nothing on the work programme for the next meeting, I suggest we go ahead with the meeting and use it as a brainstorming for what exactly does need to be on the work programme, because it has this committee has a crucial position as scrutiny in those two areas.
Yeah, I quite agree, and I think it's an absolute need that we get more things on the work programme. One of those things, obviously, one of those responsibilities lies with us in a very big way, so I'd encourage all members of the committee to please put in work programme requests, to have a think, to discuss, to start working on what more we could be filling these meetings with, because whilst I take being disgruntled at the cancellation of meetings, I was personally disgruntled because I have an item on the work programme that I'd put forward. There weren't any other work items on the programme that others had put forward, so that made it difficult for me to then say, well, there was all this other stuff that we need to look at, because I'm still working through that work programme item, so please do your responsibility as well and make sure there's those things on the work programme so that we can fill those meetings.
I'm quite happy to talk about those work programme items that I put forward last night, if you can remind me what they were.
Do you have them, Ellie? No worries. We
to
put
my
you on
head
the
and I
spot.
just wrote
Kevin's
it through.
memory isn't quite there.
The first one would be, and it may be a written response rather than a verbal response, but it would be to present to the committee the exact technical difference between the Reg 18 consultation and the Reg 19 consultation, and also not just a legalistic definition difference of those two things, but also a layman's definition difference, because over the last 6 months, I've had lots of conversations with lots of councillors and lots of officers, and an awful lot of misstatements being made about, well, if we don't need to sort it in Reg 18, we can sort it at Reg 19, and that's not really the difference between Reg 18 and Reg 19. So I think it would be worthwhile getting somebody like Joe Bromley to come and clarify that and enable a discussion on it, on what could and couldn't happen at Reg 18 stage and Reg 19 stage. So that was the first one. Any questions? Or
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned about that setting a precedent, because we're here to scrutinise, not necessarily be sort of have technical issues explained to us. I think that would be my worry about that.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's possibly, like you said, a written response, a kind of training, whatever that is. That looks like it might be better as a sort of as a written circulation to the committee.
Sorry, the second one, which is was proposing that the consultants who did wrote the water cycle study presented it to this committee for scrutiny in detail. I know there's been the opportunity to feedback within Reg 18 spatial strategy consultation, but consultation feedback is not the same as scrutiny, and I would certainly value, as a member of this committee, really being able to probe and question a lot of the statements, a lot of the data that are contained within the water cycle study. And in terms of infrastructure that you were emphasising before, I think there's a pretty strong argument to say it's the most important infrastructure item that affects almost everything that's going on within the plan. So that would be my second suggestion for a work programme item.
Couldn't agree more. More infrastructure discussion. I think we particularly need to. I think, like we said, we've had half of meetings, and all the meetings, largely aside from the local plan, have been around the environment portion of our committee brief. I think it's important that in order to fill the other half of meetings, we're going to need to also pick up that other part on infrastructure. And I will continue to have the conversations with the officer team to try and get some of those bigger discussions on the table as well around Seal and S106.
I believe I wasn't on the council when the water cycle was being debated before I joined, but I think actually the committee that was before this, because it was named something else which I've now forgotten, did actually look at the water cycle before and obviously make some comments on it. So it would be quite useful for us to perhaps have a session on looking at the the new one rather than the old one. So yes, I certainly support that idea.
Lovely. Is that everything from you, Councillor Chapman, on those, or do you have?
Sorry, the third one that I was reminded of was a presentation, and I'm not sure who from, but to enable scrutiny of the details of the local nature recovery strategy. Again, it's quite similar from the point of view that it's mentioned within Reg 18 consultation to do with the draft local plan, but it never came to this committee or any other committee. It didn't go to cabinet. It didn't come to this committee. It was what do you call it? Adopted. It was adopted and voted through under delegated authority. And I don't know. I'd be interested, Becky. How many councillors made any contribution to your questions about the LNRS?
I can't exactly recall, but it wasn't many. It may have been one or two. Yourself might have been one of them. I can check for you.
So the point is, I don't think it's had any scrutiny at all, and it does. Okay, you could say it's back to nature recovery rather than the environment, but it is a strategy that is about land use, and therefore it is the environment, because if land is used for housing, it's not used for industry. If it's not used for industry, it's used for solar panels. So I think it does have an impact on infrastructure in that way. So I think it would be good to be presented and scrutinised by this committee.
I will wait for officers to come back with more on that once they've had a chance to look at. I know you only got the work programmes in today. Please absolutely hear you on the meetings. I will basically over the next week try and get a reading from officers on what can be put into that March meeting. If you can, in the meantime, get work programme requests in so that we can make use of those. Obviously, the more we've got and the more options on the table, the more likely we are to be able to make them work and have officers bring forward the reports, which I know takes time and effort of that out of their day, and they've got lots of other priorities, so we do need them to have the time to bring stuff forward. So the more options on the table and the longer that they're there for to pick from, the better. That, I believe, brings us to a close for this evening. Thank you all for sustaining a long meeting, but I think it was important. Thank you so much.